Hello everyone, I am Shao-Hai Guo. Welcome to Forum 1. This evening I'll be discussing a very famous site in Boston's Freedom Trail. This site is the Old South Meeting House. Now for those of you who are unfamiliar with this historical building, it's arguably most well known for being the place where the Boston Tea Party was planned. It's also where there are annual reenactments of the Boston Tea Party meeting. So, naturally, this meeting house holds a lot of historic importance in Boston. The Old South Meeting House was originally created as a Puritan church in 1728. This church wasn't some sort of grand Gothic cathedral, but according to Godey's Lady's book, it reflected the Puritan nature of its members. The architecture was simple, plain, and sturdy. It could fit 6,000 people. Members of the meeting house included the likes of Phyllis Wheatley, Samuel Adams, William Otis, and even a very young Benjamin Franklin before he left for Philadelphia. Outside of Sundays, the Old South Meeting House served as a building dedicated to lively meetings, a lot of the times involving politics. Quite a few of these important meetings occurred in the building. We already discussed how it was known as the place where the Boston Tea Party was planned, but how about the time in 1768 where colonists protested British impressment of Bostonian sailors? Impressment is essentially kidnapping people to serve as soldiers or sailors. Or how about immediately after the Boston Massacre in 1770 when thousands of angry colonists demanded the removal of the king's garrison? Then, up until 1775, dedicating an annual day to remember the Boston Massacre. How was this commemorated? By massive gatherings in the Old South Meeting House, along with rousing speeches by the likes of John Hancock and Joseph Warren. So other than the Boston Tea Party, quite a few other important events occurred in this church. So it shouldn't be that surprising that the British ended up desecrating it when they seized Boston in the Revolutionary War. The pews and pulpit were cast aside. Yankee Doodle was played during public worship. Sunday sermons became horsemanship contests. That's right, the British literally had horsemanship contests inside the church. Needless to say, when George Washington recaptured Boston, he was aghast at the state of Boston's largest church. Now, what should be surprising is that the Old South Meeting House was almost sold for scraps in 1876. 4 years before that, there was a great fire in Boston, which damaged much of the church. The church was auctioned off, and its material was going to be sold if not for a last-ditch effort by the likes of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Louisa May Alcott, and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. According to the Old South Association, over $400,000 was saved to raise in order to save this historic site. That was quite a lot of money in 1876. The building officially became a museum in 1877. This didn't stop lively meetings from occurring inside the meeting house, however. Jonathan Vogels described how many societies debated on the First Amendment inside the building during the 1920s and 30s. Nowadays, the Old South Meeting House is a tourist attraction on Boston's Freedom Trail. If you took a class on a field trip there are quite a few interactive activities you can do. The museum allows classes, for instance, to conduct their own fiery tea tax debates in the same building where Patriots and Loyalists did in 1773. Just make sure you prepare your students beforehand. The museum also has interactive activities emulating the work of Phyllis Wheatley, including exploration of primary sources and artifacts. So, if you're in Boston on December 16th, you can also see a live reenactment of the Boston Tea Party meeting inside the museum. The Old South Meeting House remains a historical site where groups of people can congregate together to debate and learn something new about the world.